One of the key qualities of flowing is to act without thinking. But when water comes across a boulder, it doesn't stop to think, which way should I go to get around this boulder? It just acts based on the sides of the channel within which it is flowing down, and also based on the other particles of water around it. It just finds the quickest way around that boulder if there is indeed a pathway to flow down. In the same way, pouring water from a bucket or from a tap into a glass or into a teapot, water doesn't think about which way, how to fill the shape of that teapot or that glass. It just flows into it. And that is actually the quality I'd suggest working towards when learning the movements of the dance of Shiva. And actually I'd suggest not limiting the idea of flowing just to dance of Shiva, but you can use dance of Shiva as a way to practice flowing. The first step is to learn the positions and the movements as we have done. And what those are like are actually, so as I said earlier, water flows down a stream bed. The sides and the bottom of the stream bed guide it, gravity pulls it. When you learn the positions and the movements, what you are in fact learning is a set of limits. So you learn the positions, those are a set of limits. You learn the movements, those are a set of limits. And the idea of flowing, of eventually working towards flowing, is to learn those limits well enough that you don't have to think about them in order to do the positions or do the movements. Instead, you can do them without thinking. It's pretty easy to learn, say, the forward movement and do it as we have done. So say from position 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It's very easy to do that without thinking. But the real challenge is to learn to do it in any context without thinking. So for example, later on we'll be doing movements with two arms where both arms are moving, and both arms can be doing the same movement or both arms can be doing different movements. The better you know the forward movements, all of the movements one arm at a time, the easier it is then to do movements with both arms without having to stop and think. So say you're doing forward from here, you don't have to think, okay, this arm goes here, this arm goes here. You just think forward. Or if you're doing a forward, change forward. So say this movement, this arm is doing a change forward, this arm is doing a forward. You don't have to think about, this arm does a forward, that goes there, this arm does a change forward, that goes there. You just do it, forward, change forward, or forward, change back, forward, back. So when you know the movements without thinking in any conceivable situation, it makes it that much easier to flow or to do those movements in combination with other movements. It also makes it easier when you're working on sequences of movements. So we might do a sequence, say, first movement is forward, but then the next movement is forward, change forward. But then the next movement after that is forward, change back, and then forward, back. So not only does this idea of flowing work in combination, but also in sequences across time. But the more you practice learning movements and then flowing, then learning new movements and then flowing, the easier it is to flow at the very end. So instead of waiting till you've learned all the movements and then practicing flowing, why not practice flowing now? And in this video I'll go over flowing one arm at a time. And by the way, you can try following along with me if you like, but my idea in what I'm trying to give you is ideas on how you can practice without the video, without watching me. Maybe you could plug it into an iPod, but the idea is to do this yourself, set your own limits. Practice moving randomly between positions within a set limit, set of guidelines, and then changing those guidelines once you are comfortable moving within them. And what helps when you're flowing is to start with a narrow set of limits, and then gradually work at widening those set of limits. So as you get better at flowing within a narrow set of limits, widen it. It's like learning to drive a car. You drive in a car park first, no traffic at all. Then you'll go on a road where there's little or no traffic. You learn how to drive there comfortably. Then you eventually work your way towards driving on a highway when there are lots of other cars, and gradually increase your speed. So the same sort of idea here. So one of the things that you can focus on is first to set a limit, say only practicing same plane movement, so keeping the arm in the same plane. So, for example, forward, transquarter, and backward, those are all same plane movements. And you can stand on one leg if you like. I haven't talked about how to stand on one leg, but you can do it. Keep this leg stable, this leg just touching the floor, or stand with both legs even, keep your spine long. But to practice the forward, transquarter, and backward movement randomly flowing, all you have to do is limit yourself to numbered positions or lettered positions. So for example, and I'll think about the position and then I'll move. So from position 1, 2, 1, 4, 2, 3, 2, 4, 3, 1, 2, 1, 3, and then change arms. 4, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4. Then try the same thing with the vertical positions. And these are all, even though I'm not calling out the movements, I'm doing the movements just by, I'm limiting myself to those movements just by sticking to moving between movements in the same plane. So A, C, that's a transquarter. D, that's a backward. A, forward. B, D, B, A. C, B, A. D, B, D, A. D, C, A. And then doing the same thing, other arm. Position A, B, D, B, C, A, B, A, B, C, D, B, D, C, A. So once you are comfortable within those set of limits, you can set another set of limits. So forward, backward, change forward, or change backward, any of those movements. And you can do the same movement a couple of times, 1, 2, 3, 4 times or more, and then change movements, or only do one movement, a movement once before changing. Both options are fine. So position 1, forward, 2, forward, 3, backward, 2, change forward, C, change backward, 2, forward, 3, forward, 4, change backward, C, backward, B, backward, A, forward, B, forward, C, change forward, 4, change forward, A, forward, B, change forward, 3, change forward, D, forward, A, forward, B, change forward, 3, change backward, B, change backward, 1, forward, 2, forward, 3, change backward. So there, I'm not quite as smooth at doing this set of limits. I haven't practiced it before, but you get the idea. You can do the same thing with the other arm. Change forward, B, change forward, 3, change forward, D, backward, C, backward, B, change forward, 3, change backward, B, change backward, 1, backward, 4, backward, 3, change backward, B, change backward, 1, forward, 2, change forward, C, change forward, 4, just like that. Another set of limits that you could work within. So at the very beginning, we only stuck to movements where the arms work in the same plane. You could also limit yourself to just change plane movements. So that means every time you move, the hand changes plane. So that would be the change forward, change backward, change, and change transquarter. But again, here I would suggest calling out the names as opposed to the movements. But if you want to call out the movements, that's fine. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking of a movement at a position at random and then just moving to it. All right, so starting from position 1, B, 3, D, 2, A, 4, C, 2, C, 4, D, 2, B, 3, D, 4, B, 2, C, 4, A, 2, C, C, 2, 4, D, 3, B, 1, C, 2, A, 4, C, 2, A, 3, B, D, 1, 2, A, 4, C, 2, C, 4, A, 2, C, 1. So even if you made a few mistakes there, oh well, if you can spot them, that's good. And then just try to get as smooth as possible so you're flowing. And then the eventual goal is, what you could try doing is no limits. See how freely you can move within positions, any of the positions at random. And there you're not even calling out, you're just doing the movements like so. One thing you could do is focus on trying to make the movements as smooth as possible. So when you're moving, try to prevent any sort of jarring, any sort of hard tension in your body. Try to stay open, try to stay long, try to move within the positions as smoothly as possible, randomly. If you wanted to, and this could be an extra test, call out the positions as you go into them, not before you go into them. This is just to see how well you recognize the positions, is to create a connection between your brain where sometimes you can call out the positions where you lead with your mind. You think of the position and then you move into it. But the other way of programming the brain is to work the other way. So do the position and then say the name of the position so that you create another link within your mind, within your consciousness. So not only can you go from the position in your mind to position in your body, but you also go from the position that your body is in and read that in your mind. C, 4, A, 2, 3, D, 1, 2, C, 4, A, 2, B, 3, D, 1, 2, C, 4, A, C, 2, B, 3, 1. I'm quite surprised I can do that. 1, 2, C, 4, A, 2, D, 2, C, 4, A, B, 3, D, 1, 2, B, 3, D, 1, 2, 4. Just something like that. And there, that last set, my movements were a little bit jerky. I noticed I was doing the movements with a jarring, so I was creating a little bit of excessive tension. So when you're doing that, once you've gotten used to moving, then say in the positions, again, see if you can do both, but do it without the jarring. See if you can make the movements smoother. 2, C, 4, A, 2, D, 3, B, 1. So that it requires more awareness of your part, more concentration, but also the more you relax, instead of saying, I gotta get this right, you just sort of open your awareness and you just let yourself do the movements. If you make a mistake, you don't worry about it. You just continue practicing. And the idea that you have is doing the movements smoothly while still calling out the numbers. And if you have trouble, if you find that you're doing the same patterns, if you can't flow freely, like it feels like you're doing the same patterns over and over again, then again, go back to limiting yourself. Stick to only doing the number positions, then stick to only doing the letter positions, then stick to only change plane moves. Another option, only stick to the acyclic movements, i.e. the transquarter, the change, and the change transquarter. But the idea of limiting yourself is to practice within those set of limits and then expand those limits so that you can be like water and flow freely within them. Thank you very much. Namaste. One final note, you'll notice that I'm dressed slightly different from this video as opposed to my other videos. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is the other videos, when I'm focusing on teaching the positions, is a bit more rigid, a bit more regimented. Oh yeah, he's only wearing his shorts and no shirt. How rigid is that? But the idea is to focus on actually learning to break things down, to focus on doing that movement, on learning it, on building it, taking the information and building it within your consciousness, or patterning your brain, if you like, building the pattern into your brain. But now with flowing, the idea is to be a bit more casual. This is like when you're starting to graduate from driving on the car park to actually taking the car or motorbike onto the streets. Ideally, you might be a little bit tense, but the idea is to eventually relax enough and to actually enjoy driving, or to actually enjoy what you're doing. And that's the idea here with flowing, is to let go of, oh, I got to do it right, and let yourself do it right. If you find you're doing it wrong, then go back to practicing the part that you're doing wrong. or just go back to practicing doing it wrong, the part that you're doing wrong, then go back to practicing flowing again. Because ideally that's what all life is about, I would suggest. And this is what Dancer Shiva is useful for, is first teaching you how to break down things so that you can learn them, so that you can build it into yourself, and then using that information, but rather than being rigid and only using that information in certain circumstances, using it freely, like someone who drives an F1 car and they can drive really fast without having to think about what they're doing, or Tai Chi or martial artists, they flow like water. They don't think about how to act, they respond instantaneously because all of that information is built into their body. They don't have to think, they act based on what they have practiced and what they already know.